Hello, my name is Hal Marzell, and I will be your host on today's podcast of Chalkboard Chat. I'm here with educator and school librarian Mrs. Terry Lee Marzell. Today's topic is the program she organized in her high school library in celebration of Veterans Day. Good afternoon, Mrs. Marzell.
Good afternoon.
Why do you think it is important to commemorate Veterans Day in the school library?
Well, I feel that honoring our nation's veterans is important, since these individuals are largely responsible for safeguarding the freedoms that we all enjoy. And these are Americans that have made sacrifices that deserve to be appreciated. I believe that teaching students to honor and respect our nation's veterans is an important part of developing citizenship in our young people. And doing this is also a service to our community. Also, I'm aware that many of our students may have a parent or a grandparent or maybe a sibling or other family member that may be a veteran. And also, I'm mindful that some of our students will themselves someday be veterans.
What activities did you organize for your library's observance of Veterans Day?
Well, the activities took place over several days. I organized a couple of speakers, a veterans related video, a letter writing campaign where the students wrote letters to currently serving veterans, and some displays.
Can you say more about the speakers who addressed the students?
Our first speaker was Mr. Jack Gutman, a local veteran who earned 6 medals in World War II. He was a Navy medic from 1943 to 1945. What's very unique about Mr. Gutman is that he participated in both the Normandy invasion and the Battle of Okinawa, and there aren't many veterans still alive who participated in both the European and Pacific theaters.
How many students attended the speaking event?
I counted 63. It was standing room only, so we felt this event was very successful. And I think what the students learned from Mr. Gutman, who suffered for decades from post traumatic stress disorder, was that even those veterans who return from the front without obvious physical injuries are often very wounded inside, and we need to understand that and be compassionate about that. In addition to Mr. Gutman's speech, I shared with students a story about another veteran, Henry Alvin Cameron, who was a high school science teacher from Nashville, Tennessee, before he enlisted in the U.S. Army during World War I. At that time, the American Army was segregated, and Cameron was one of the first African Americans to complete officer candidate training so that he could become a leader for black troops. He was 45 years old at the time, so serving was optional for him. He could have simply said, "I'm too old," and watched his students march off to war. Yet he answered the call. He was killed in the Battle of the Argonne Forest just days before the armistice. Now, I'm personally very moved by Cameron's story, but I also wanted to talk about him because I wanted to ensure diversity in our programming.
What was the movie you featured for your Veterans Day program?
This year I selected The Red Badge of Courage, a movie based on the acclaimed book by Stephen Crane. I selected this movie because it connects well to the 11th grade language arts curriculum and also because it expanded our celebration of veterans to include Civil War veterans.
You mentioned that you organized a campaign to write letters to the veterans. How many letters did your students write?
Well, we only had a handful of participants show up for this event, but each one wrote about 5 letters, so we had a decent sized stack when we were done.
What did you do with the letters?
I put them all in a large envelope and mailed them to an organization that distributes citizen written letters to veterans currently serving overseas. So those letters will actually find their way into the hands of veterans.
You said earlier you created library displays. Can you describe these displays?
Well, I created 2 displays. The first one was the standard book display you usually see in a library. My student aides pulled history books and biographies about veterans from our collection, which we arranged on a table decorated with a patriotic cloth and American flags. The second display was our Wall of Honor tribute. We asked students to bring in photographs of veterans who were their family members or friends. We asked teachers and staff members who are veterans to bring in their photographs. And we also collected photos of former students who are now serving. We placed all of these photographs on a bulletin board along with a message thanking them for their service. This display really seemed to resonate with everyone, so I was very pleased with the participation it generated.
Thank you, Mrs. Marzell, for describing your Veterans Day library program for our listeners today. I'm Hal Marzell, and this concludes this episode of Chalkboard Chat. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and we hope you'll be with us next time.